City Councilman Yusef Salaam, one of the exonerated 5, now has oversight of the NYPD as chair of the Public Safety Committee. So my first question to you is, has your view of the NYPD changed since you've been chairing the Public Safety Committee?
I think my view of the NYPD has changed since I've come out of prison and really been engaging audiences about the future of what policing can look like.
So how has it changed? I mean, you thought that you were wrongly convicted and you didn't think that the police were right. And how has that changed since you've been out?
Well, the good thing about it is that I spoke to an audience once, and this was right after the Central Park 5 documentary was released. Young girl in the audience, 13 years old, she stands up and says, "I'm a cadet, I'm 13, I want to become a cop. What advice can you give me?"
And
now,
you
of
said?
course, I was like, but I'm so happy that I thought about what to say to her, because I realized very quickly that this was not an officer yet. She represented what the future of policing could look like. And so I gave her some of my best advice. The fact that on the side of cop cars, there's the words "to serve and protect." That in New York, we go a step above and beyond and add the words courtesy, professionalism, and respect.
And that's the key.
Right. And I said to her, if you can be this type of officer, you will be the best officer. And I know many officers like that. And so it's not that the whole of the police departments across America, in fact, are the same. There's many, many different layers of humanity that is inside of those places. And I think we're trying to tap into that humanity in order to get the best, the very best out of them.
So here's the thing. People today say they don't feel safe. I wonder if you think that more police officers are the answer.
You know what? What would add to the safety of our communities is a living wage. Because poverty is something that drives crime. When people's backs are against the wall, when they're in survival mode, often they do things that they wouldn't necessarily do.
So you're saying that a lot of the things that happen, like on the subways and other places, are the theft of, the shoplifting and things like that, are because people are poor?
People are trying to survive. I mean, we live in a state right now, a city, in fact, that the cost of living for a single person is around $131,000 if you are keeping up with the times.
Right.
Most people individually do not make $131,000 a year.
That's a lot of money.
Now, if you look at me and my family, they say that if you have a 2-parent household with 2 children, you need at least $300,000 in order to live comfortably in New York.
And that's not happening.
I have 10 children. That is not happening anywhere across the board. But when you think about the fact that everything is going up, but our wages have not caught up with the times.
So what should the city council be doing? What should businesses be doing? I know that we recently raised the wages for delivery people, but what about other people? I mean, should the city and the state be doing that as an anti-crime move as opposed to hiring more cops?
I think absolutely. I think we have to work in tandem. I call it righteous collaboration. And when we do that, we get the opportunity to look at all sides, consider all the possibilities, and realize that when we're trying to solve for the immediate, it's about looking into the future and then working your way back towards this goal. In the meantime, we may need to shore up security. But at the same time, we also need to make sure, in fact, that, for instance, as we deal with the migrant crisis, that we also deal with the homelessness in New York. We have to do them both.
Well, you brought up subways. Do you think that we need more police officers on the subways to make people feel safe? The idea that people see police officers, not just, have those call buttons where you can call for help?
I would say yes. I would say absolutely. If we had officers that did what I remember when I was a child, they would walk the cars. When you saw them, that was a great deterrent. So
you want to have more cops on the subways?
In the short term, yes. In the short term, because it is a deterrent, it is something, when you can see those individuals who are the guardians of society doing what it is that we hired them to do, oh my goodness, game changer.
But you raised the issue of poverty causing crime, a contributing factor. And one of the things on the subway is fare evasion, and the fact that the MTA says we need more police officers going after fare evaders. Now, do you think that's a good thing, a bad thing? And is that preying on people who just can't afford to use the system?
I think that's a bad thing. That absolutely oftentimes is preying upon people that need to use the system. And there's many people, many children, in fact, who try to use their Metro cards and their Metro cards are not working. And to arrest the person, to give them a summons or anything like that. There's other things that we could be doing, and I think that they may consider that the low-hanging fruit, but the truth of the matter is that we can do so much more to shore up New York City.
So I have a question for you. Mayor Adams has talked about an anti-police bias, which he says is causing the possibility of a law enforcement crisis because it's making it difficult to recruit cops who are retiring in droves, to recruit correction officers and other people, firefighters, EMS workers, people who work in the law enforcement community. Do you think he's right that we are on the verge of a law enforcement crisis because people just don't want to do those jobs because they're not popular, or is he over-dramatizing the problem?
So there's a few things I think that I've heard from the community, and one of the things is, of course, yes, we need officers that do the jobs of protecting society. We also need to make sure that it makes sense, right? In the background, if you have been giving a mandate that says, look, you will only be able to rise up this ladder of success by doing X, that's a challenge because oftentimes people enter into these professions because they want to be noble. But if you have a family to feed, if you have things that you need to do, you might do things that you might not normally do and say, well, this is just my job. And we need people to look at the humanity inside of themselves as they provide that same security to us. So how do you recruit more
people? I mean, there are more and more attacks on police officers than ever before. We've just lost a police officer who was shot.
Yeah.
How do you recruit? I mean, you can't have a city without police officers and correction officers and people like that.
I would agree. I would agree that you need a system that works and a system that is fair, a system that is unbiased. However, my heart goes out to all of the officers that lost their lives in the line of duty. It's one of the most tragic of stories. Here you are protecting and serving. You've stepped up, in fact, to be a guardian of society, and your life gets shot down that way. We need to really have, I think, a conversation that includes all of the people who have been, in fact, close to the pain, because that's how we find the best solutions.
So another question I have is this. The governor wants to increase the number of crimes that are regarded as hate crimes because she thinks that there's been such an increase in those kinds of situations. Anti-Asian, anti-Black, anti-Jewish, anti-Palestinian, anti-everything. Do you think that's a good thing, and do you think that we should be increasing penalties for people who commit hate crimes?
I think so. I think we should make sure, in fact, that when specifically hate crimes happen, that we have something to address that. And I think when of course, as a Black man and also as a Muslim, I have not yet seen that same type of laws attributed to Black men and Black people in particular. I know we're working there, we're getting there, but I think that really, it drives things, because it causes people to say, uh-oh, I need to see this person. I cannot use my bias in order to trample upon their rights. I really should see and understand that they might be saying Allahu Akbar, and that means God is the greatest. You know what? God is the greatest.
So another issue that's working its way through Albany that will actually affect us in New York City has to do with how we should deal with shoplifting retail crimes. And the governor is wanting to add more penalties for people who shoplift, which is getting a lot of pushback in Albany among, especially in the Assembly, because they're concerned that stiffer penalties aren't going to stop people from shoplifting. And we get back to your issue of poverty driving people to do that. How do you come down on her desire to increase the penalties for shoplifting?
Well, I mean, we have to really consider what is actually happening. When you, for instance, catch a shoplifter, what do they have on them? What are they stealing? Oftentimes, it's just bare necessities.
Food, clothing, health goods.
And I mean, food, clothing, shelter. Those are our needs. Everything else is a want. So
we should increase the penalties, we shouldn't increase the penalties?
I don't think we shouldn't attack a problem with prison, for instance. And when I think about how we've been attacking problems like, mental health as an example, you know, even with the officers, right? Our officers are called to the scenes when in fact we need to be sending mental health workers there. And so I think we really should figure out how do we infuse the society so that the one who is on the bottom gets the opportunity to be lifted out of their condition.
I get it. Well, we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. We're back with a bonus conversation you'll only see here on CBS News New York. So I'd like to ask you about your district. Tell me about your district and tell me what makes your councilmanic district so special.
Oh my goodness. Harlem is known around the world. It is in fact the very place where the first Renaissance happened. Of course, we're trying to resuscitate the very soul of Harlem by bringing back the second Renaissance. Very, very special place. Very dignified place, I would say. People are noble, but the fact of the matter is that Harlem is hurting. Harlem is in pain. Harlem has been divested of and in many ways forgotten, but what happens now is how do we revitalize that? So I'm here to really add to the greater good, to make it count, in fact. Harlem is very special.
So what's the number one issue your constituents come to your office with? Their biggest concern? The
biggest concern is the same concern we're experiencing around the country, around this very city, in fact, and that is housing. Housing is a necessity, but more than that, we need housing that allows us to be able to plan in safety. And what I mean by that is something that's affordable. It has to be affordable because I can no longer say to myself, do I pay the rent? Or do I feed my children? So
how do you get developers to come in and build that kind of housing that the community so desperately needs?
In the past, it was incentives and deeply affordable incentive. We have to come back to that space. We have to figure out two things.
Tax breaks?
Tax breaks, yes. But long term, we need to make sure, in fact, that we as a community, as a society, in fact, go from surviving to thriving. Because in the meantime, yes, right now, we do have people who are living below the minimum wage, the poverty. We have people who are in pain. But I don't want us to be comfortably poor. I want us to get what we need so that we can start making plans.
But aren't you really saying you have to create jobs to do that? Because you just can't have government pay and pay and pay.
This is
also,
correct.
You have no pride if you're not working.
This is absolutely correct. This is, I mean, you said it. When you have anchors that matter in society. I mean, imagine people in society, in fact, in the communities that you're in, building the community up. When their children are growing up, that parent can say, I put a brick in that building. I say that to my children when I walk by the Esplanade every single day, because when I came home from prison, that was one of the greatest jobs I had, putting the windows into the Esplanade so many years ago.
So if you were going to play tour guide in your district, what are the one or two places that you would take people that's like a must-see? They have to see those places.
Well, absolutely the Harlem State Office Building, because of the specialness of that place. The fact that we have Adam Clayton Powell Jr. right there.
The statue.
Yes, solidified in stone. I would take them also to the Harriet Tubman statue, the Frederick Douglass statue. You know, all of these places, you know, Harlem itself is such a special place. They say if it happens in Harlem, it happens around the world.
So what's your favorite snack, not to change the subject?
I got to tell you, I've stopped eating so many snacks lately, but, you know, my go-to, I would say, would probably be the bean pies.
Really?
Yeah, because you can find them now in stores, and you can find small ones. So, you know, if you feel like you're cheating a little bit because of maybe some of the sugar content, you know, you get the opportunity to get a taste as opposed to the...
So you're careful about your sugar intake?
Oh, you have to be. You have to be. So many of us are succumbing to health issues, and those health issues find its way in our community as disparities.
So what qualities do you think make a good leader?
I think what makes a good leader primarily is making sure that they're not thinking about themselves, but in fact thinking about the legacy that they're trying to leave, the fact that they're working towards their children's 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 future. And by that I mean not just personally, but the collective.
So is that what you try to do as you, have taken over this job as city council member from Harlem?
Absolutely. I'm trying to make every single thing that I have gone through matter. The good, the bad, the ugly. I'm using it to really guide me as I move forward.
So knowing all that you know now, what advice would you today give your younger self?
Oh my goodness. I heard this question asked of Oprah Winfrey, and she said, I would tell my younger self to strap in and enjoy the ride. I think part of the secret, and we find this all throughout Scripture, you look in the Bible, you look in the Old Testament, you look in the Quran, of course, and you find God continuously telling the people, do not be afraid. And when I think about my journey, I think about how I was plunged into the darkness.
You were afraid then?
I was afraid then, but when I was told, do not be afraid, when I opened my eyes, I found out that I could see in the dark. Very, very beautiful thing.
And on that beautiful note, we're going to have to end. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
And thank you at home for joining me as well.